Today I'm going to be talking about how you should be lifting, what your program should look like, and what exercises or movements you need to be doing in the gym. Now, why am I talking about that? Well, because just this week I've had over 20 DMs from young rugby league players who've asked me that very question. They've asked what should be in the gym program and how should they break it up. And if I'm being perfectly honest, it's probably going to be a lot better for me because every time someone asks me that question, I can at least send them this video as a starting point. And from their point of view, they can definitely get way more information in a short video than what I can send via text in a DM. So let's jump right in. The program split you should be using, and it's the split we recommend to most of the players working with us in the program, is an upper body day performed twice per week and a lower body day performed twice per week. Now, yes, there's always a time and a place when more or less may be appropriate, but what we're running through here is what is required for most people most of the time. And because this is such a big topic, I'm actually going to break it up into two different videos. In this one, we're going to be talking about your upper body day, and in the next video, we're going to be talking about your lower body day. Okay, so what should your upper body session look like? As a bare minimum, every single program should include the following movement patterns. You need a horizontal push, a vertical pull, a vertical push, and a horizontal pull. Now let's run through what each of those actually are. The first movement pattern is the horizontal push, which is basically any kind of chest press or bench press variation. So a chest press on a 45-degree incline, a 30-degree incline, a 15-degree incline, a flat bench, or even a decline. These are all horizontal push movement patterns. These movement patterns, they can be performed both with dumbbells and with barbells, but our preference for anyone who's just starting out is to only use dumbbells, at least for the first 3 to 4 programs. Now the reason for that is by doing so you can work towards evening out any imbalances between the left and the right side of your body. These are the kind of imbalances we often see in players who come to work with us who've been doing their own work in the gym, only using barbells for all of their chest movements. By the time they come to us and we conduct our initial assessment, we find they've got shoulder pain, they've got restricted range of movement, reduced strength, and significantly reduced power output, both in the gym and on the football field. So yes, while getting stronger in the bench is definitely super important, it shouldn't be done at the expense of overall structural balance within the body. So that's your horizontal press, and it should be performed as either the first or the second exercise within your session. I'll get to that later. Now the next movement pattern we are looking at is the vertical pull. The vertical pull is any movement where you're pulling from an extended or stretched position with your hands above your head and you're pulling your hands down towards you. An example of this would be any kind of lat pull down movement. Now this movement can be a little bit of a funny one because there's two distinct variations which are actually training the same muscle groups and the same movement pattern, and they often look like opposites. A pull down, like a lat pull down, or a pull up are actually the same movement pattern. Even though in a lat pull down the body is fixed, it's fixed in place and the hands move towards the body, while in a pull-up, the hands are fixed in place and the body moves towards the hands. Now, the pull-up is typically a more challenging and advanced movement simply because to perform at least one rep, you need to be able to lift your entire body weight. And even though we prefer pull-ups and pull-up variations as exercises because of the greater core activation, it can definitely take a while to get someone sufficiently strong enough to be able to use the movement within a program. And on a side note, something to be aware of is that elevated levels of body fat can make performing pull-ups or chin-ups impossible. So using a variation of pull-down exercises while working to lower body fat levels is often the best pathway to take with people that are newer to strength training, as well as those that are needing to lower their levels of body fat. So that's the vertical pull movement pattern. And again, like the horizontal push, it should be done as either the first or the second exercise within your session, and I'll explain why in a minute. Okay, so the next movement pattern that we're going to be looking at is the overhead press. This can be done seated, it can be done standing, it can be performed with either dumbbells or barbells, but just like we said with the chest press movements, in the first 3 to 4 programs, we like to have our athletes using dumbbells only, which will improve the structural balance in the muscles responsible for the movement pattern, predominantly the deltoids and the triceps. Now, there's a massive amount of different variations you can use for this. You can do it seated with back support, you can do it seated but unsupported, where the lack of back support forces you to be a little bit more upright. You can do it seated on a 60-degree incline. You can also perform the overhead press while standing, which you can do with a split stance or a straight stance. You can use dumbbells, you can use barbells, or depending on what other equipment you have around, you might even use kettlebells or cables. You could even do a landmine press. Now, an important side note here is that within any given session, you want to perform any horizontal push movements before any vertical push movements. Now, I mentioned this earlier, you need to do your chest press movements before your shoulder press movements. If you do the shoulder press movements first, you'll fatigue the deltoids and the triceps so much that the chest won't receive a training effect at all. This is really important to remember because the shoulders and the tris will fatigue way before the pecs do within the set, and you'll get to a failure point without the pet getting anywhere near being exhausted. So it's not really going to get a training effect. Now at some stage in the future, I'll do a video that goes into this in a lot more detail, but for right now, just trust me on this. Do your chest work before you do your shoulder work. Okay, now that's the overhead press movement done. We're going to move on to the fourth and the final movement pattern that you need to include, which is your horizontal pull. And if I'm being honest, this is probably the most neglected of all the upper body movement patterns. And there's a whole multitude of reasons why that might be the case. But all I can say is that if you want your upper body to function properly, if you want to get ridiculously strong in your upper body and be able to develop that explosive power that every rugby league player is after, it's not going to happen unless you get strong in the horizontal pull. Now, what kind of exercises are we talking about? Basically, any and all rowing movements. So, single arm dumbbell rows, single arm cable rows, 30 degrees prone dumbbell rows, any of the different seated row variations. There's more than a dozen of those. What else? Inverted rows, bent over rows, T-bar rows, supported rows. Basically any movement where the effort in the movement is when you're pulling the weight in towards yourself on the horizontal plane. Now, just like we mentioned earlier with doing chest press movements before shoulder press movements, when it comes to pulling movements, we want to be doing our vertical pulling before we do our horizontal pulling movement. So get your pull-ups and your pull-downs in before your rows. The main reason is that your rhomboid muscles, now they sit on your back and they sit between your shoulder blade and between your spine. They function more as a stabilizer in the pull-down movement, whereas in a row, they actually function as a prime mover. If you do your rows first, what ends up happening is you can't hold good posture in your pull downs. The fatigue will cause your shoulders to pop up and your form will go out the window. So get your pull downs and your pull ups or chin ups in before your rows. So those are the 4 movement patterns you need to include in your upper body programming. The horizontal push, the vertical pull, the vertical push, and the horizontal pull. You want to get them in and you want to do them in that order, the order that I just laid out. Now, like I said, I'll do another part to this where we can look at what you should be doing with your lower body, and probably even a part 3 where we look at sets, reps, as well as some ancillary exercises like training your rotator cuff, your core, and even some arm work. But if you keep it simple, if you follow the structure above, you'll minimize the risk of injury, you'll maximize the progress you make at building size and strength, and you'll start to see that transfer to a bigger, stronger, and more powerful athlete on the rugby league field. Trust me, because I'm Joe. And Joe knows.